Hello to everyone. Again, I want to thank Matan and Liat and Chayabina Zan as well for arranging for our wonderful series of family ties. Again, I love this, Torah family ties. And particularly in Sefer Breshit, to all my children, we're going to continue with the saga of Sefer Breshit and particularly see where we left off last week in the beginning of Parshat Noach. Today, we're going to see a major transformation that takes place between Parshat Noach and the not only post-diluvian, the ends of Parshat Noach, but hopefully in preparation for this week's Parshat HaShavua, also get a sense of the transformation of parent-children relationships that we see already at the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha. So without further ado, I'm going to begin by sharing the screen with where we left off last week. So quick review, because this is right now only our second shiur. So a quick review of some of the Mekorot with which we started, just to remind you. And the theme of Toladot, which already tells us, okay, Sefer Breshit really is about genealogy. It really is about the relationship between parents and children. But what we saw is that this is also about the actions that are going to determine either universal or particular selection and rejection from fulfilling the purpose of the world according to God, which is to call out in the name of God. So we begin, if you remember, with getting rid of preconceived notions so that we can note that the Torah does not take these preconceived notions of an ideal parent and unconditional acceptance of children. We're wait till we see this week's Parsha. Again, for sure not. And now also the struggle, not so much, again, strangely, not going to see struggles really, and not so much between parents and children. The struggles are going to be more between the siblings themselves. And we saw that this is also going to be significant. All of us parents, again, we're thinking, well, and maybe even worse than the child arguing with us is when we see children arguing amongst themselves. But that being put aside, we can't ignore and the Ramban, Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, particularly Sefer Breshit and the stories of the Avot, teaching us so many lifelong messages for our days as well. But Toladot, as we said, and it really does imply the transition of generations from parents to children. And we saw the transition in the first 11 chapters of Sefer Breshit, and wherein there's God's creation of mankind. The focus is on mankind. And yet, and now we're going to hear that God is not going to destroy the rest of the world, but God is going to designate Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. There's an idea of an Av. And we're going to develop this idea throughout Sefer Breshit, patriarchal and matriarchal figures, and how this is going to be part of not just the destiny, but really the messages that help us appreciate and what it means that we still call them our avot, right? Even though they're great grandparents, we still call them our fathers and our mothers. And that says something about not only learning from their actions, but learning messages of parenting from them. So notice we don't call Noach an Av, which is a good thing, because let's take a look and see now where we left off, how Noach is as a father. So we said, firstly, and we hear about the Toladot of Noach, and more than hearing about his children, we said it actually starts with Ela Toldot Noach, Noach ish sadik tamim haya b'dorotav. He doesn't see his Toladot. He's not focused on his children. He's focused more on his Noach ish sadik, on his righteous ways, which teaches us maybe a little bit like what we saw last week, like his father Lamach, if you remember, calling him, oh, my son is going to solve the problems of the world, but I'm going to be passive. So Noach really did internalize this message. He's trying to focus on himself and save the world. But as a result, he doesn't necessarily see his children as part of his success, as part of what he is supposed to be edifying at the same time. And that's why Rashi says Toladot means children, but also it's true that tzaddikim also see their actions. Their actions are their toladot. The ma'asim are literally the fruit of their labor, and not just, the fruit of one's loins, so to speak. So what happens with Noach, though? Noach does, and as we discussed at the very end of last week's shiur, Noach does call out b'shem Hashem. Just like we saw, Cain and Hevel don't, but Shet does. And that's why we heard about, again, the Shet line being chosen and everyone else being destroyed, followed by Noach, again, and his children being saved, everyone else destroyed, because Noach calls his son Shem. that's already giving us a sense that, okay, Shem is invested with this name of God. And as Shem carries the name of God, Chazal will tell us, Shem becomes, the teacher, the founder of the first Beit Midrash of monotheism, because he represents calling out in the name of God. And it's not just the peers of Noah who are Giborim Anshe Hashem, who are calling out in their own name, but unfortunately, even after the Mabul, people revert back to the selfishness of Dor HaPalaga, where they're once again, Nasel Lanu Shem. They're calling out in their own names and not the name of God. And that's why it's not just going to be Noah's children, only Shem. Shem is literally Shem and Aver. Aver on the other side of this. They're calling out in the name of God. Everyone else is calling out in their own names. So now we're going to continue and see what happens during this generation, basically, of Migdal Bavel. Let's see then, and how this idea of calling out in the name of God is or isn't going to continue through children. So if you remember, we began with a relationship between Adam and Chava and their child Cain, and we saw that they see themselves as godlike, right? They're calling out in their own names, and therefore they don't really have much to do with this child. And the same sibling rivalry, Cain and Hevel, so it really does result from the messages that their parents are inculcating within them. By calling Cain, Cain sees himself as the continuum of Adam, the Ish Adama. And that's why he brings Peirot of the Adama. He brings, okay, God, here are the fruits really of my labor. Whereas Hevel, who isn't even given a name by his mother or father, he becomes Hevel, he becomes vapor, he becomes fleeting. And that's why he's the shepherd, because he doesn't even inherit any of the land. He doesn't work the land. But what he does learn how to do is to bring of the animals. He knows that he's greater than the animals. He knows that one can kill the animals, whereas Cain sees everyone really as equal and almost as a creator of himself. So this is what we ended with last week. And the failure really of, one can say, the first set of Toladot. And that's why Adam and Chava, when they have shait, they say, Shat li ben acher. Shat Hashem li ben acher. Hashem gave me like another chance. Okay, this one I'm not going to mess up. And sure enough, shait calls out in the name of God, even if it's a distorted name of God. But then comes Noah. We said, Anna, his father, places all of the hope in him. We saw that term of Vayihi, if you remember. Okay, things aren't going to work out so well. And then we saw how the Mabul is supposed to restart everything anew. And what does it mean, restarting everything anew? We're going to see over and over and over again, when it comes to the story of the Mabul, if you remember, over and over again, it's going to say, Noach v'ishto u'shnei banav. Noach v'ishto u'shnei banav. We hear about, first and foremost, this concept of family. And if we look carefully, we can even notice this in other words as well. When Noach and his family come out of the Teva, what is the first thing Hashem says? The same first commandment that Hashem gave Adam Harishon. Pru urvu u'mil'u et haaretz. Go ahead and populate the world. Let's start the world anew. We're going to restart really parents and children relationship. And we're going to re-identify family structure. And this is when God says, okay, but there are going to be a few differences. Man, part of the problem is that you saw all of creation is equal. And therefore, then you acted like the animals and literally became only physical beings. So that's why I destroyed you, because you weren't living up to your spiritual state. So here's the irony. In order for you to live up to your spiritual state, I want you to see yourselves as physically different than the animals. Apparently, it wasn't enough that you were eating rooted vegetables and they were eating the rooted vegetables. Now you can even eat them. That's number one. Don't think that just because you're better than the animals, that you're better than your peers, that you're better than one or the other. No. And this in itself changes things. We're supposed to look at people differently. We're supposed to look at human beings, and this is the amazing idea that, wow, there's something different about us than animals. B'tselem Elokim asat ha'adam. And you can imagine that even this commandment is meant to change the relationship between parents and children. Because if I see myself as an animal, then I look at the animals and I see they procreate, I procreate, their kids look somewhat like them, my kids look like someone like us. And we need to hear, no, b'tzelem Elokim. No, don't look at the animals and see how they procreate and, believe it or not, even raise their children. And because if you look at animals, what do? They really, again, we have ample opportunities, definitely in Eretz Yisrael, to see cats, right, raising their kittens. And you see, they lick them, they keep them clean, they bring them food, for the first few days, and that's it. And even those mammals that really do take care of their young, it's a much more physical nurturing, right? We're different. And don't look even at the parenting techniques of animals. Realize that your B'Tselem Elokim is very different than animals. And that's why we saw that God was trying to teach this really from the very beginning, that man should not exist alone. Man should exist, again, with women. And he shouldn't even abandon his children, as we see apparently that Adam and Chava really do with Cain and Hevel. There's no interaction between them. Except if you remember the Midrash that says Cain actually taught Adam Tshuva, right? As we refer back to last week. So now this idea that and I'm going through this very quickly, that we see in Rav Kook as well, that Hashem wanted us to exist more with other members of society. If we're supposed to develop a society, and that's what, or how Rav Kook understands lo tofayot adam levado, we're not meant to be living all alone. Rather, we're meant to be taking care of everyone. And there has to be this natural, he calls it even mishichat tiv'it pnimit, right? A natural internal sentiment that brings us closer to other people. You can imagine then how God wanted us to exist within at least even mini societies, right? Formed by families. And that's why the Meshech Chochmah says we need 12. And we need 12 months of chinuch in the teva in order to learn how to even live together as, in this case, people. And notice this, I have no idea. I told my children with a quarantine time, I said, this is so wonderful. I don't think I've spent so much time, again, alone time with my children. Even when you think of family time, I think of family vacations, I think of going out with the family. But here it's really been family time. I was in Bidud with 4 of my children, and 2 of whom are in university. So they're already off in their apartments in Yerushalayim. And for the first time, really in 2 years, the 2 older kids and 2 younger kids, again, we're all together in the same house, once again, working around the dining room table. It was not just nachat, it was a beautiful, I felt even okay, we're rebuilding this family society. That's what's going on. Again, the teva, they're all in quarantine together, and they have to develop. They can't help it. They develop as a family, right? They're going to talk more around the dinner table than they ever did. And that's why, and Rabbi Akiva says, that's part of the Tselem Elokim as well, that we're supposed to realize and recognize the Tselem Elokim one and the other. We're supposed to not only see ourselves as broader societies, but definitely as family. And here's a proof right now. Take a look at Breshit Perek Vav. And when Hashem speaks to Noach about going into the teva, what does he say? Vakimoti et briti itach uvata el hateva. Over and over again. Just get ready. You're going to keep saying these milim manchot, these repetitive words. Ata uvanacha bi'ishtecha oneshevanacha itach. Okay, Noach, you're going to go, and your sons are going to go, and your wife and your sons' wives. Now, I'm sure we're all thinking we could have just said this in a much more concise term, right? It could even have said uvat el hateva and ata umishpachtecha. But the reason why it doesn't say mishpacha is because the concept of mishpacha has not yet existed. And therefore, Hashem is going to say over and over again. And this is what parent and children relationships really need. Over and over again. Ata uvanacha bi'ishtecha oneshei banacha itach. Hashem is redefining, right, what society is. If until this point it was every man on his own, in which case everyone saw themselves really on their own and on equal grounding, including with the animals, then there wasn't really any social balance that was taking place. Hashem says, let's try this. We're going to establish what Rav Soloveitchik very often calls through marriage, a microcosm of a community through a family. And let's see what happens. Now, notice that it's not just about Noah and his family and his children. But umikol hachai, okay, we're going to separate this and teach you, man, you're not like animal, you're not like man, and go one step further. Man, and you're going to create these microcosms, and within society, you're going to create these mini communities, which we're going to call family very soon. Umikol chai, mikol basar, shnai mikol tabi al hateva, lachayot itach zachar nekeva yiyu. So this is very interesting. In the animal kingdom, there's going to be also zachar nekeva. Okay, you're going to stay with your kind. Now here it doesn't say that they come with their children, that they come with their young, and that's exactly the point. The animals really do, most of them abandon their young. But zachar nekeva, they're going to have units of two. You're going to have units of ata uvanecha. Notice, this really could be, I would even say, the theme of our shir of all my children. Ata uvanecha, right? We could call it that in Hebrew. Ata uvanecha. It doesn't say ata v'ishtacha, uvanecha u'neshevanecha. And you would say, that would be so much more, I would say equal rights here, the men and the women, but that's not the point. The point is ata uvanecha. You're not going to have the same model as the animals. There, otherwise Hashem could have said, ata v'ishtacha. It's you and your wife and your sons and their wives. That's not how we form a family. It's not just a man and woman. It's going to be man and child, and woman and child. And the point is to see that as the formulation. And truth be told, just even think of the vernacular, right? When a man and a woman, right, husband and wife, when they have a child, all of a sudden they have new names. They've been redefined. That child makes now a mother and a father, right? Now we always say, now, mazel tov, now you're a family. Wait, we weren't a family before him? No, you weren't. You were a couple. Now you're a family. Animals have couples. Man has families. And that's exactly what God is trying to do. Restructure, right? The existence, the communities of this world. Rashi even says, what does it mean? This is a fascinating Rashi. Otan shedafku b'minehem, v'lo hishchitu darkam, u'meilehem ba'u. Only the ofot that stuck to their kind. In other words, all the different fowl that mixed with other species don't end up surviving the mabul, don't go into the teva. Only if you can identify your species are you allowed in the teva. In other words, only if you know your role within nature can you come into the teva. Kol shateva kol toto chnispa. And you can imagine there were some fowl that came, the teva didn't accept them. And only if they really had preserved their species and there wasn't too much crossbreeding, and then, and you can imagine, Chazal also talk about, homosexuality, and then if they maintain their min, and that's how they're going to come into the teva. Let's take a look and see this again. Parag Zayin. Hashem tells Noah, Bo'ata v'chol beitcha. Okay, even more sophisticated. It's not just Ata v'nacha ishtacha neshevanecha. You form a bayit. So even though it's a teva, it's an ark, it's okay, you're a bayit, you're in a home. And we're going to continue to see this. And I hope that we have time to continue and Sefer Shmot across these series where you're going to see a beautiful development of the bat and the bayit and the ben and the bniyah. And you really see this before we're a nation, we're first families. But this is really based on themes in Sefer Breshit. Come as your bayit into the teva. This is what constitutes the home, which teaches us as well that in a home, you're not necessarily supposed to have your third cousins, right? Ata uvanecha ishtacha u'neshevanecha, that's a bayit. As opposed to the behema, again, ish vishto. Man is a bayit. Animals don't have a bayit. The Gemara explains, isn't that interesting? From the behema Torah, 7 were taken of each, right? So they have 7 couples there. Shiba, ish vishto. Ishut lebehema mi etle. And what does this mean? Again, ish v'ishto, really? Amar Rabbi Shmuel, what? They're like husband and wife. There's Mr. Cow and Mrs. Cow. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, me'otam shelo nevda behem aveira. A similar idea. And this is what Rashi's based on. That, yes, Mr. and Mrs. in the sense that they could still be identified as cows, right? That they didn't crossbreed. Mana yada. Amar Rav Chisda, sheheviran lefnei hatzeva, and the teva was like the Harry Potter sorting hat. right, decided which species maintains its identity within the world, they can come in because they're going to perpetuate as animals, right? And they're going to keep creating man. But man, no. You're not just perpetuating your species, liminehu, anymore. You're going to perpetuate Tselem Elokim, the image of God. How are you going to do that? You're going to not just be couples, you're going to be a bayit. You're going to be a family. So I'm going to pause for a moment as I see some chats coming here. And if they were learning to get along, what happened when Noah was drunk? Excellent. Great question. We're going to talk about that. And yes, I'm going to make the source sheet bigger. Okay, there. Okay, I hope that helps. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about now. Okay, the mabel, as we said, was great quarantine to create a bayit. Let's see what happens after. Perek chet. Vayidaber Elokim al Noach lemor. Say min hateva, again, ata v'ishtacha. And if you're reading this carefully, you're just saying, it's repeating it again. Yes, the family unit. I get it. Hashem wants us to be a family, but this time it's different. Now it's not just about parents and children. It's not ata uvanecha. So Chazal learned from here, this time, come out as couples. Why? Take a look. The first time, this is so exciting. Noach uvanav bishto u'neshei banav ito. On the most basic level, Pasuk Yudchet says, okay, Noach came out the same way he came in. God said, come in with your sons and your wife, and then the wives of your sons. Chazal criticized Noach, because even though that's how Hashem wanted him to come in, they wanted them to come in, and basically Hashem wanted them to come in and form that bayit. But in order to form that bayit, and this is such a beautiful psychological message, now come out, Chazal say Hashem is about to say, pru or vu, have more children. So that's why Hashem said, come out with your wife, hint. And start now with a couple. Now that you understand what a family is, come out with your wife and redo this, have more kids. And you're going to see that you're going to educate these kids differently even than Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Ata v'ishtacha uvanecha u'neshei banecha. Let them now, understanding what it means to live in a teva, to live in this bayit format, differently than the animals, educate them differently. And I have to tell you, we have children, my husband and myself. I had 4 children in the first 7 years of our marriage, and then we had a 5-year break, and then we have another child, a 4-year break, and another. And I remember with child number 5, I would say this all the time, and I look at him now. Child number 5 is now 17 years old, and say, I definitely educated the younger 2 so differently than the older 4, definitely different, than the firstborn, which is a topic in and of itself. And I said, even told my husband, wow, Hashem is giving us a second chance to learn the messages of this, but also you're a more mature, not just parent. You understand the dynamics of, again, you're really not a couple anymore. You really are a family. And I don't just mean that the older siblings help to take care of younger siblings. You truly feel, you feel this family unit. And that affects the way that you raise the younger children. Right? And I look at, especially the youngest one, and I see how he has chavrutot with my older children. The older children never had that. By the time you have, and the younger children, which is why Hashem says, Noach ata v'ishtacha, come out, and now you're going to educate your children, even the children that you have now. You're going to educate them differently, understanding what a family is. And why am I so excited by this verse? Look at Pasuk Yutet. Kol hachaya v'chol harames v'chol ha'of, kol romei sal haaretz le'mishpachotehem yatsu min hateva. This is the first time, as we mentioned, that we're going to find this word, le'mishpachotehem. Even the animals, they couldn't help it. They went in as couples, they came out as families. And over the course of the 12 months in the teva, again, gestation, they came out as families. And the Torah calls them families because, and even if they come out and all the giraffes go in separate directions, nonetheless, on that teva, they were they weren't just, again, husband, wife, they were mother, father, baby giraffe. Limishpachotehem. And this is emphasizing that on one hand, animals are called a mishpacha, and certainly then, the human race, we're also going to have mishpachot, but in the same context, they're a mishpacha, we're a bayit, right? We actually form that unit that is also a physical unit. Whereas, and by the animals, they don't actually have that physical containment, and they don't all live in the same nest, whereas we do. The Torah is teaching us these values, live together, right? Yes, mother, father, children, that's the bayit. All of us, though, are going to have these mishpachot. The question is, what's going to happen now with Noach? Is he going to take advantage of the messages that were taught in the Teva? Is he going to learn what we've been speaking about, a new Tselem Elokim, wherein man this time recognizes that he's different than the animals. Man recognizes that he's supposed to live with others like himself and treat others and with respect. Man is supposed to realize that he's not just supposed to procreate and bring children like animals into this world, but is supposed to build a bayit with them. How is that going to affect the education? How is that going to affect even communication? Because with all the narratives that we've seen in the first 8 chapters of Sefer Breshit, we haven't once seen a conversation between a parent and a child, a conversation between, again, a husband and a wife. We've seen by, as we know, Adam and Chava, Ish v'Isha, not necessarily the most pleasant conversation with regard to, again, eating from the Eitz Hadat, but nonetheless, communication between them. No relationship / communication between Adam, Chava, and Cain, certainly not with Havel, not even with Shet. Lamach, even when he speaks about his son Noach, is not speaking to Noach. Noach is a pitzalach baby. He's speaking about his son. Let's see now. Right after the Mabul. Vayivarech Elokim Noach ve'et banav. Again, it's supposed to change. Hashem is asserting, please, Noach, have a relationship with your children. He blesses both of them, pru urvu umalu et haaretz. And this time, don't look, you're different than the animals. Your fear should be upon the animals, as we said. Then you can now eat the animals, but you cannot eat, literally consume or kill other people, because tselem Elokim, the tselem Elokim asat Adam. So again, pru urvu, but pru urvu differently than the animals. Sure, tzuba aretz urevuba, but different than the animals because you're a tselem Elokim. Okay, Elokim now tells Noach ve'banav. Again, this time, the first time we hear Noach ubanav, Noach ve'el banav, over and over again, parents and children. Hopefully you're going to continue, parents and children. All my children over here, I'm going to have a brit with you. I'm not going to destroy the world again. And et kashti natzati ba'anan, here's the sign of the brit, namely the rainbow. And now the keshet ba'anan, Hashem assures Noach, Zot otabrit asher hakimoti beini uvena kol basar asher al haaretz. Vayu b'nei Noach hayotzim min hateva. And they come out, and what are they known as? Before Shem Cham and Yafet, they're b'nei Noach. And we're supposed to applaud. There's been a development here of a family. There's been a development of parents and children. They come out, they see themselves as b'nei Noach. Cain never said anything about being ben Adam, right? Hevel never saw himself as the son of Adam. Definitely not any of the other personalities that we've seen. Even Chanoch, and we said that last week. That was one of the problems of Noach, that he exists in his own independent bubble. But now there's B'nai Noach. They're Shem Cham and Yafet, but they're B'nai Noach. And again, just in case you're not convinced, the very next pasuk, Shlosha Elu B'nai Noach. Now let's see Noach himself. Does Noach change as a parent? Vayachal Noach ish hadama v'yitzhakerem. The Torah is already assessing that there has been some type of change, and I don't mean a metamorphosis of the 40 days and 40 nights of the Mabul with regard to the world being destroyed. Something happens with Noach. Vayachal Noach, literally it means, and Noach began, hu hitzchil. Chazal understand that word again, hu chilel. He had so many opportunities and he desecrated them. He distorted them. What did he do? How is he described at the time or before? Pre-diluvian times, Noach ish sadiq. Now what is he described as? Ish ha'adama. Something happened. He lost his righteous personality. He became a man very much involved in the Adama. And we're supposed to say, wow, what an idealist. That's great. The world is destroyed. He's going to become a farmer. But look, he doesn't plant a cucumber patch. Rather, vayita kerem. He became immersed in the ground and earthly matters. And this is definitely, right, post-traumatic stress disorder right over here. Vayita Kerem, what's his escape? What's his channel? A vineyard, right? Not a basic mode for survival for man. He planted something for pleasure, for escape. And what's the proof? The next verse. Even if you want to say he is helping industry, really, vayesh min hayayin. He becomes inebriated. Vayishkar vayitzgal betochalo. And all we're going to do right now is because we don't necessarily have all the hours that I would love to really develop from an exegetical perspective the different understandings of even these words. We're going to try just to adopt a pshat method and appreciate how Chazal are truly remarking on the text and the context of this very interesting story. I'm sure there were many episodes post-Mabul, but this is what the Torah chooses to tell us, that when in his state of drunkenness, Vayit Gal, right? He was uncovered, not Vayigal, he was uncovered, B'toch Ohalo. And right now we're thinking, beautiful, right? This is perfect time. He removes his clothing, have children, pru or vu. And Chazal say that's exactly it. And one perspective of Chazal is going to learn from this that he actually wanted more children. He saw in the Teva that, and all the different animals, they kept on having more children. And even though it meant more of a balagan, they helped out the older ones. Noach realized that he was the one taking care of everyone. And he said, oh my, what's going to happen when I'm older? I may as well have another child who will be a ben skunim who will help me out. So according to the Midrash, Noach actually wanted another child, a fourth child. And what happens? Again, sibling rivalry. Cham was the youngest, and Cham didn't want a younger sibling. So we're going to see, Vayar Cham abi Knan et arvat aviv. Cham saw that his father is getting ready to have relations. And he told his brothers, oh my gosh, daddy and mommy, they're going to have another child. This is not good. And Ham and Shem and Yafet said, no, Ham, what are you doing? Getting involved. Stop it. That Ham did something. Not clear exactly what he did, but something perhaps that prevented Noah from doing what he wanted to do, which is to bring more children. Chazal, however, say, no, that doesn't seem to be what's going on. Rather, he's inebriated right now. He doesn't expose himself in the context of having relations with his wife. There's no wife in the story. Rather, that's exactly what's going on. He should have been with his wife. And instead, what is he doing? He's going off getting drunk. He's not exposing himself for the sake of perpetuating a family and educating the younger children, a little differently. No, vayitgal b'tocha alo. And let's see this. Vayar Cham avi Kna'an. And this time we see they're actually identified. Cham here isn't identified as Ben Noach, like he was just 4 verses earlier. But now he's the father of Canaan. He sees his father's nakedness. And many other Parshanim explain he actually was mocking. This was not considered respectful to see your father in a state of nakedness. And he came out and he actually publicized this. And many of the Parshanim, Ibn Ezra says he went out to the shuk and he started telling everyone, oh my gosh, I saw my father again naked. And now you can imagine this is going to bring a lot of embarrassment to Noach, but Chazal are not necessarily going to understand it that way. And where do we see this? And it says that Cham saw his father's erva. He tells his 2 brothers outside, and Shem and Yafet take a garment and they cover their father's nakedness. They didn't see their father's nakedness. So this is going to be the most confusing verse. Noach wakes up from his state of intoxication and he knew what his youngest son had done to him. But if Cham just saw him literally naked without clothing, how does he know that? So Ibn Ezra says, because he went to the market and that's when everyone, starts saying, oh, look, and he knew that, the emperor's new clothes, that something was awry. But Chazal say, what does that mean? It seems that he woke up and he knew, he actually saw that something was different. So let's take a look. And the Midrash and Bereshit Rabbah explains 2 opinions. And one opinion we see right over here, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Yehuda says that the pasuk, Vayivarech Elokim et Noach ve'et banav ve'en klala have b'mkom bracha. He says in the end, he's going to end up cursing, and he curses not Cham, but Cham's son Canaan. And that's number one. Rabbi Nechemiah says, why? Canaan ra'avi gid l'cham, because Canaan was part of this. And he saw Noach and he told Cham. And what happens? This is the first opinion of Chazal. Amar Barachia, Harbeit Tsar Nitzter Noach Bateva. Noach was serving everyone. He was the handyman on the Teva, and he didn't have a younger son. And Shem, Cham, Yafet, they were dealing with their own. And he didn't have a younger son who would help him out. So he said, I want a younger son who's going to help me out. And according to Rabbi Nechemiah, what did Cham do? Cham castrated his own father. And Rabbi Nechemiah is saying that's how Noach knew what was done. He looked and he saw he was castrated. His own son castrated him, and therefore, and he turns to Cham and says, you prevented me from having a fourth child. Your fourth child, who was Canaan, I'm going to curse him. That's Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda explains Viriviyah, that he wasn't castrated, rather, Cham actually engaged in homosexual activity with his father, but that would be difficult. Again, how would Noach necessarily know this? But without further ado, let's go back and try to understand, maybe there's another possibility. And sure enough, if we go back to the words of seeing the erva, we know throughout the Torah, especially in Sefer Vayikra, that what does it mean to see erva? His father's nakedness is his mother. In other words, Hashem had told Noach uvanav pru'ervu. Cham is wondering, he sees his father getting drunk, he sees his father getting undressed, but he's not with his mother. So what did Cham do? Cham says, oh, dad is ignoring mom. And dad doesn't want to bring any more children into this world because he saw what happens. Every time, again, you bring children into this world, God is going to destroy the world. He's sunken into depression. Poor mom. And she's there all alone, not being able to bring more children into this world. Cham sees his mother's nakedness. That's a terminology for he has relations with his mother. Oh my, right? This and incestual relations. So this may be what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. There was sodomy that was practiced. Again, incestual relations, promiscuity at its worst, right over here. And ervat aviv, that Cham is distorting exactly what God wanted to happen. No. Now you're supposed to have like mishpachot. Again, parents and children. Cham and says pru'ervu. That's what then overrides everything. So I'm going to be with my mother, which means that Canaan, albeit it's Noach's grandson, it's Cham's son with Noach's wife. And therefore, he curses this bastard child, this illegitimate child. Noach wakes up, vayeda. It may have taken 3 months, but he knows he hasn't been with his wife. He knows that if his wife is pregnant, and certainly if he sees the child, Canaan, he says, this child, he's not one of my children. Then he's going to have to serve both Shem and Yafet. Don't think just because he came from my wife that he's one of mine. Whereas Yafet and Shem, who tried to stop this, Baruch Hashem Elokei Shem, v'hi Canaan eved lamo, yafta Elokim liyafet v'yishkon ba'alei Shem. And you're all supposed to say, what a failure, what a disappointment, post the Mabul. I thought now we're finally going to have the development, and I don't even know what normal parent-child relationships are yet based on the Torah, but come on, don't bring me back to pre-Mabul times, but that's exactly what we see. There isn't a clear bayit anymore. And that's why I think that this Perush, in addition to the Pshat, is supported by the continuation of the Parshanut of the Torah in Sefer Vayikra. And that's why this is the end. For all intents and purposes, we're now finished. Vayichi Noach achar hamabul. 300 shana v'chamishim shana v'yu kol yemei Noach 900 shana v'chamishim shana v'yamot. You don't even hear about his children. You don't hear about mishpachot. You don't hear about a continuation of toladot. Instead, you're just going to hear, as we know, the continuation is going to tell us about the toladot of Shem. The line is going to continue through Shem. And this is where we see, again, one last idea here. Vayered Hashem l'rot et ha'ir. We see the generations of Shem who were chosen because they call out in the name of God, as opposed to chapter 11, after the end of the Noach and the dynamic of his family. We hear instead what happens. There aren't really parents and children, but people have developed a society, at least that much, and they're building a migdal together. Isn't that nice? But this is interesting. The first time then that we find this terminology of, and God sees the migdal asher banu b'nei ha'adam. Remember before the Mabul, the term that was used was b'nei elokim. People saw themselves as God, right? Godlike and indomitable. God sees b'nei ha'adam. So Rashi, quoting the Midrash, asked the obvious question. Why does the Torah call humankind b'nei ha'adam? It should just say, I don't know, anashim. Vayered Hashem l'rot et ha'ir bet ha'migdal asher banu. Again, even just say like Adam. Why say b'nei ha'adam? Rashi says, ela b'nei mi. Who do you think these people are? They're children of donkeys. They're children of camels. Of course, they're children of Adam. Ela b'nei Adam harishon shekafat hatova. Rashi says, no. And Hashem is saying, do you see? Even with the Mabul, we didn't go forward. These people are just as bad as the sons of Adam. They're just as bad as Cain and Hevel and Shet, and that whole generation that was killed out. They're just as ungrateful as the same Adam who ate from the Eitz Hadat. Ela kafu b'tova. They were ungrateful. B'mi sheshbiam tova matam min hamabul. They didn't appreciate that God wanted them to develop, that God save them from the Mabul so that they can build a better society. And instead, what do they want to do? They want to go and build a migdal against God. So this is very sad and very depressing that after the Mabul, just when we thought that now, oh my children, relationships between parents and children, Noach, gen ubanav, ishto uneshe banav, bayit, mishpacha, new words that we haven't seen before now in Tanakh. We thought, okay, we're going to go forward. Here's the very depressing part. We're going backward. We're not to worry, because all that changes already at the end of Parshat Noach and the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha. And therefore, I'm not going to end on a depressing note with you, but rather, let's already start the development that we hear. Then right now, at the end of Parshat Noach. And we hear at the end, as we said, of Eile Toldot Terach. Take a look at this. Now we don't have the Toldot of, and last time it was Eile Toldot Noach. Noach ish sadik tamim haya b'dorotav. Noach was focused on Noach. Only the next pasuk we hear, Vayivaled Noach, Noach had Shem Cham and Yafet. This time, Eile Toldot Terach. What are the actions of Terach? What are the toladot, the genealogy of Terach? Terach oledet Aram et Nachor vet Haran. The focus of these toladot, the focus of Terach's life is going to be on his 3 children. We finally hear there's a relationship between Terach and his children. The Haran oledet Lot. Isn't that beautiful? In the same pasuk, let's prove it right now, that not only does Terach have children, but Terach gives birth to Lot. And this pasuk reminds you so much of Eile Toldot b'nei Noach, again, Shem, Cham, and Yafet. Here we also have a father with 3 children. And by the way, the 3 children are going to have very similar fates. And one is going to be chosen, and Shem, and here Abraham. One is going to be rejected, then Cham, and here we know Haran, because we're not going to hear about him again. And the other one is going to make his way into the family. Yaft Elokim liyafet b'yishkon ba'alei Shem. Yafet is going to somehow be incorporated in the family of Shem, and similarly, Nachor's descendants, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, are going to make it into Abraham's family. So we don't even hear just about one generation. Haran olidet Lot. We hear now that, wow, they're real families. People see themselves as connected to the previous generation. Vayamat Haran. Haran dies. Al pnei Terach aviv beret moladato ba'or kasdim. And during Cain Hevel times, or pre-Mabul, or even immediately post-Mabul times, what would you think would happen to Haran's children? They each go their separate ways. No, not anymore. We're going to hear that each one of Haran's children is going to be taken care of by the family. There really is a family. Vayikach Avram v'Nachor lahem nashim, shem eshet Avram v'Sarai v'shem eshet Nachor Milka bat Haran. Avram and Nachor marry the daughters of Haran. They're taken care of. Vatihi Sarai akara in lavlad. And Sarai, who apparently is Yiscah, because it says that Avram marries her, or maybe not, Avram marries Yiscah because she's a daughter of Haran. And Sarai, then, is Akara, and that's Eshet Avram, Sarai, and that's why Chazal preserved them. They're the same one, Sarai and Yiscah. Vayikach, but it gets even greater than that. We're going to see that when Terach moves, Vayikach Terach et Avram beno, vet Lot ben Haran ben beno, Terach takes with him and his son and his grandson, Lot ben Haran ben beno. Now you see, for the first time, some pseudo-functioning family, a parent, a child, and even a grandchild. And let's underscore this idea even more by remembering that right before Pasuk Chav Zayin, we heard about Terach's father. His name was Nachor. For the first time in Tanakh, we're going to hear that a father names his son the same name as his father. So either, I don't know if Nachor was still alive when he had his son Nachor, because he had him rather later in life, but either he followed the Ashkenazi custom or the Sephardi custom, pardon the anachronism. So either he named him after his deceased father or after his alive father, but it doesn't make a difference. He's perpetuating the names within the families. This is when it starts. It starts as early as the family, not even of Avram but Terach, which also underscores why we find Ele Toldot Terach. Aren't we expecting to hear, if we're talking about the Toladot being the particular selections now, isn't it Avram Avinu who's selected? And the answer is no. You're going to see that it's the whole family of Terach that we're going to hear about. We're going to hear about stories of Lot. We're going to hear about Nachor. We're going to hear about Nachor's children. As a matter of fact, we see from here that it's not just about the fathers that are going to be significant, but the mothers as well. It's Nachor's granddaughter, Rivka, who's going to be part of the selected family. It's Nachor's great-granddaughters, Rachel and Leah, who are also going to be part of this selection. So it really is the Toladot of Terach, the selection of the Terach family. And you have to ask yourself, what is it about the Terach family? So I'd like to end with this beautiful message. Based on the chronology of events as told by the Torah, we hear Vayikach Terach et Avram beno, bet Lot ben Haran ben beno, bet Sarai kalato eshet Avram beno, vayitzu itam me'or kasdim lalachet artza Canaan, vayavo ad Haran vayishvu sham. Very often we forget about these last verses at the end of Parshat Noach because we're so used to the beginning of the Parsha of chapter 12, Lech lecha mi'artzecha. God told Avram, go to a land, and God didn't even say what land, but in the end, Avram landed up in the land of Canaan, and then God promises him the land of Canaan. Notice that, I like to say, Terach is the first Zionist, not necessarily the first religious Zionist, but the first Zionist. I don't know why. Maybe for commercial purposes, maybe for, again, economic opportunities or political, sociological. Chazal explained maybe for religious freedom, in fact. And Terach picks up and decides to go to Canaan. Wow. Terach wants to go to Canaan. And Rashi actually explains that Terach went on his own, to Canaan, but he stops off where? He ends up in Haran, which tells you that he was only going for ideological and not theological reasons, because he got to Haran and he saw greater business opportunities in Haran. He changed his Zionistic ideology a little, and in the end, he's in Haran, where Rashi says, then God tells Avram, okay, Avram, leave your father, leave your homeland, leave the land where you are right now, and go somewhere else. And Rashi says that he actually left. He left earlier, but the Torah doesn't want to say that he left while Terach is there, because we don't want to make it seem as if Avram is leaving his father. In other words, there seems to be an idea of kibud avim. For the first time, we see the opposite of Cham. There seems to be a certain development and sensitivity of you don't generally leave your father. Wait, what do you mean? Cain left his father. Everyone leaves their father. Not anymore. Now the norm is you stay. Parents stay with children. Avram, you go against the norm. and leave your father. And the Ramban says, okay, so first we hear about the death of Terach, and now we're going to focus on Avram. We're going to go back in time and hear that really God had told Avram earlier, and that's what Ibn Ezra says. God told Avram already in Ur Kasdim, Lech lecha me'artecha. And according to Rashi, Hashem said, Lech lecha me'artecha, when they got to Haran, right? Hashem said, okay, that's very nice. Terach stopped. You go. You continue going. You leave this place. According to Ibn Ezra, Hashem had already told Avram, Lech lecha me'artecha, and Terach, then Terach at that point probably saw Avram packing and said, Avram, where are you going? And Avram says, I don't know. God told me to leave this place, to leave you. And Terach said, okay, I'll go with you. I want to go to Canaan. And they're both heading now to Canaan. And Avram has no idea where he's really going to end up, but he knows his father wanted to go to Canaan. His father made it as far as Haran. And now we hear Hashem says, and Lech lecha. Ibn Ezra says, only now do you hear about the Lech lecha? In order for you to realize that when Avram actually went, he wasn't going because his father was going. He was going because God said to go. And now let's end with what Hashem had said. Hashem said, Lech lecha, Avram, I want you to give up your whole past. I want you to abandon your father. I want you to abandon your father's wishes. I want you to abandon your father's legacy. I want you to abandon your father's culture. And you're all supposed to say, this doesn't make sense. Right? I thought the Torah is already establishing a certain trajectory of a bayit. And now Hashem says, I want you to leave that bayit. And doesn't this somehow, I get it, that Hashem wants Avram to establish a new culture. Hashem wants Abraham as a monotheist to spread and to call out his name. I understand. Hashem wants him to leave his pagan background. But doesn't Hashem also want the development of family? And maybe this is how we can understand the words of Lech lecha. We know that Lech lecha, right? The Midrash explains, Rashi quotes, Lahanatcha letovatcha, that Avram, I know this seems to be against your grain and the grain of the Torah. I know that it looks really bad to leave your father, but I'm telling you that this is good. The Noam Elimelech says that Hashem is saying, and you're going to figure it out later, how this is really good for you, how I know you better than you know yourself. And therefore read it as, Lech latzmacha. Really, Avram? This is the way that you're going to be the best you. And the Netziv says it as well. Lashon la'atzmacha. Because Abraham halach badad b'machshavto, afilu hanarim shalchumo lo yadu davar, when it came to the Akedah. But now Abraham is going to leave everyone, and they're all going to realize that he's leaving. So what is the main idea? Notice what goes on here. Abraham is told, Lech lecha. I'm not telling you where. I'm telling you, I know it looks like you're abandoning your father, and I want you to go as if you're willing to abandon your father. But notice this. And then I'm going to make you a great nation. And I'll bless you. And notice that word again. And Avram was in fact 75 years old. And when he leaves his father, so he definitely again felt very much attached to his father. And God says, now sacrifice your past for the sake of the future. And where does Avram end up? Avram ends up in Canaan. And I smile because I get the chills every time I think about this. God basically was telling Avram, I want you to follow my directive. I want you to think that you're abandoning your past. But actually, Avram, where are you going to end up? You're going to end up in the land that your father wanted you to end up in all along. Your father wanted you to go to Canaan. Just when you think that you're abandoning the legacy, the dreams, the hopes, the values of your parents, if you're following the will of God, this is actually the greatest way to fulfill what your parents want from you. I always imagine that Terach probably got so much nachas from Abraham, not only from, his children, and I'm talking about the course of history, but by saying, wow, my son Abraham, he made it to the land where I didn't make it. But not because he was fulfilling my dreams, but because he followed the will of God. And what we see from here is that the Torah is not really telling us abandon our parents. Even, and I tell students this all the time, even when you think you're doing something different than your parents, and you'll see that like the core values that were inculcated in you by your parents, those don't change. that's going to be what you give your children. Whether you're brought up religious or irreligious, you're going to educate with the core values that your parents had instilled within you. And all of a sudden, by Abraham, we see that the value of Terah, taking care of his children and grandchildren, in fact, is going to be passed down through Abraham Avinu. But what we're going to focus on next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, because you have another class now with Nechama, is we're going to see how Parshat Lech Lecha, all of a sudden we have not only the relationships between fathers and children, but in order to be a properly functioning family, we're going to hear now about the development between mothers and children. So I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And okay, it's only Monday. So Shavua Tov and Shabbat Shalom. As you look at this week's Parsha, after the disappointments of last week's Parsha, hopefully we're going to begin to see a positive trajectory for all my children.